Hello, and welcome to the Bluesman Retro-Viewer 5000. We do sincerely hope you enjoyed today's show. So ladies, gentlemen, illustrious brain-augmented primates, let us look back on the past together. Today's selection begins now.
Hey there, cats and kitties, I am the Bluesman, Johnny Blues, and today I'm going to be reviewing the 1988 Martin Brest film, Midnight Run, primarily starring Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin, with featured appearances from Yaphet Kotto, Joe Pantoliano, John Ashton, and Dennis Farina, among others. It's primarily the story of Jack Walsh, a former Chicago cop turned bounty hunter who is really ready for retirement. He's fed up with that side of his life, always getting shot at, having to fight it out with criminals and bad guys, and being strung along by his on-again, off-again boss at a bail bonds establishment, Eddie Moscone. So, he's ready to end it, move on. And, of course, this coincides with Eddie's making a huge mistake by allowing an embezzler of the Chicago mob, this cat by the name of Jonathan Mardukas, a.k.a. the Duke, actually walk free. So, of course, he calls in the best that there is, Jack Walsh, to get this guy back. And, it takes some convincing for Walsh to actually take the case to go after this cat. Jack has a can of worms laid at his doorstep because it's up to him to track down the Duke and basically bring him from, as he finds him in New York, from New York to L.A. by Friday at midnight, and he has, only a handful of days to do this. So, of course, he has raised the ire of this Chicago mobster, Dennis Farina's character, Jimmy Serrano, and this all ties into his past because he was actually ousted from being a Chicago police officer by the same man, Jimmy Serrano. And we have Walsh having to contend with the myriad of feds led by Alonzo Mosley, Yaphet Kotto's character. He has been wanting to take down Serrano just as much as Mosley has because this guy is just, notoriously no good. And he made the move from Chicago. Now he's a Vegas wise guy. And so these two sort of opposing characters are really on the same or similar wavelength. And as if that's not enough, not only does he have to fend off the goons that Serrano sends after him, he also has to endure the time and time again trying to one-up his bounty hunter rival, Marvin Dorfler, as portrayed by John Ashton. Because at some point, Eddie Moscone, being the swindler that he is, doesn't see Jack getting the job done quick enough and calls in the second best that there is to pick up the slack. And similarly to the relationship between Walsh and Mosley is the relationship between Walsh and the Duke. These are two very different people who come from different lifestyles, but are essentially doing the same types of thing, putting their best foot forward. In the case of Walsh, he's been putting criminals in jail for all his life. In the case of the Duke, he's somebody who, when he found out who Jimmy Serrano was, that he was basically a thug gangster killer, he decided to embezzle those millions of dollars and give it to charity, do the right thing. Of course, he did keep some for himself, but we see that this is a continuing note in the character, that he's actually kind-hearted. Something that comes to the fore in a scene where the lines of communication between the two are finally beginning to open, and the Duke senses that deep down within Jack is a lot of anger and angst that has to do with his ex-wife, and he actually talks him into going to visit her. And these are just one of many moments in the film where we actually see that these two people who seem to be very different are at the end of the day very similar. Depending on your perspective, they don't get along as often as they do, but when they do, it really works. And so there's a lot of different interweaving, plots going on here and arcs between characters, skirting the line of a road trip movie, but it really isn't. I mean, there is a cross-country trip going on, but I think it's, something I always describe it as is an anti-buddy cop flick. But it isn't by any means a perfect film. One point of contention, in any case, is something that stems from a minor character in the form of Jerry Geisler, the assistant to Eddie Moscone. He really seems to only exist as a contrivance to assure the convenience of both the feds and the mob staying on the coattails of Walsh and Duke as they're traveling. I mean, they're traveling across country, state after state. It's hard to believe that they would so easily be found again and again. It's really hard to find a needle in a haystack once, let alone repeatedly as it happens in this film. It does get a little jarring to, the matter of convenience that all of these people seem to show up at the same point in the same time to confront each other time and time again. But that, as well as I guess you could say the profanity in the film, a lot of the sort of humor that comes out of it is the vulgarity of the Jack Walsh character. He's said to have an ulcer, and what is observed by his counterpoint character in The Duke is that he only has two forms of expression, silence and rage. And that's sort of the running theme throughout the film, that he only expresses really the most peak of, anger and rage and stuff like that. And this kind of all escalates on a scene where they talk about sex with chicken. And while that may be off-putting from the get-go, it's sort of interesting that this is actually one of the more heartening scenes in the film, because basically it's where Walsh and the Duke are actually finally communicating on a similar wavelength, whereas they've been counterpoints all throughout the film. This is where we finally see the first beginnings, the first hintings of a change in their characters and thinking of each other more as equals rather than rivals. And it's very interesting also to note via the IMDb's website for the film, under their trivia section, the director Martin Brest actually gave Grodin the direction to try to come up with something that was guaranteed to even make Robert De Niro laugh. And so this is one of those classic moments where we have these two characters who have just been against each other and, not really seeing eye to eye, and it just levels the playing field. Of course, while it could have been something more family-oriented with the humor that is in the film, it's things like that, the vulgarity and just cursing all over the place that just... It makes it more for select audiences. But in spite of that, what you have at the end of the day is much more than just an action comedy or even a road trip film. You have interesting dichotomies between these characters, and it's thick with pathos. While primarily it is an action comedy and there are lots of funny moments, there are actually many dramatic moments as well as suspenseful feelings toward the end of the piece. And while it does require some suspension of disbelief for the conveniences of how everyone seems to run into each other time and time again, I really do think it is a good movie. So that's pretty much all I have to say on it, and I hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.
This concludes today's selection. Thank you for viewing it. We now return you to your 24-hour surveillance visualizer on the as-yet unfolding zombie apocalypse. Good day.